Alrighty. Clicking out. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll hop right into it then. So, alrighty, welcome everyone. So back with another episode today, joined by Professor Steven Lopez, who's an associate professor in chemistry and I guess biochemistry as well, I think, right, at Northeastern. So excited to have him on today, talking some chemistry, as always, I guess, with like every episode. But but I guess today's a little bit more different because definitely you're definitely in an area that I'm not too familiar with computational photochemistry, basically. But it'll be really excited to talk about that. Before we get there, though, definitely want to talk about your background a little bit so people can get to know you. I know you went to New York University, so I don't know if you kind of grew up in the New York area, but perhaps we could start there.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in New Jersey, actually, the great state, and I lived there until about like first grade or so, and then I moved with my parents down to South Florida. So I was both in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and pretty much grew up down in that subtropical swamp down there. And my parents are, so I'm first generation in chemistry and like actually in a lot of things. So my dad was born in Cuba and my mom was born in New Jersey, all to kind of Cuban parents. And so it was a big part of growing up. So, New Jersey at the time had a really big Cuban population in like North Bergen, Union City, just across the Lincoln Tunnel from New York. And then of course, Miami still has, I think, more than a million Cubans there. So, so I didn't really feel underrepresented in anywhere until I got to NYU, which was kind of a big culture shock, I think. But so
that's
really down there.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Philadelphia area, so very familiar with like New Jersey. But you said, you said you grew up in Miami, though. I have to ask, do you still keep up with like Inter Miami's new, to be fair, but I'm not sure if you've kind of kept ties with Miami at all, because with Messi there.
What do you mean, sorry?
Inter Miami.
Oh, Messi, yeah. Well, yeah. I'm a very temporal soccer fan. It only happens on the World Cup, and then I get super into it. My group right now was super into the World Cup, and so I love like everybody Messi now, and I'm glad he went to Miami. Yeah, definitely.
I still can't believe it happened. It's just unbelievable that he's here in the United States. He's just in Miami.
There's a huge, just living his best life. I think. Right. I think Miami is kind of capital, I'd say, unofficial capital of Latin America. So like really all the best Latin American food is there, and so I'm sure he's at home.
Yeah, another interesting piece of information that you just shared with us is that you're a first generation in chemistry. I presume. Definitely correct me if I'm wrong. You're probably the first. Are you first to graduate like college, or just certainly maybe a graduate degree?
Yeah, my mom did an undergraduate and is a teacher. My dad didn't go to college, so and absolutely nobody did science in my family at all. So and it's funny in Spanish, right? Profesor means teacher, right? Not necessarily like university professor. So explaining this to my grandparents could get challenging because they're like, "You're so smart, like basically, why do you want to teach kids?" And I was like, no, like it's a research job, and like it's kind of hard to explain, but I think they get it now. I think so.
Yeah. So how did you get into STEM then? Was it through like maybe junior high or high school down there in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area? Like how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I think I was always really interested in science and the sciences. Kind of a nerdy story is that I actually, growing up in South Florida, I would like track hurricanes. So I got really into weather as a kid, just kind of naturally. I didn't know anything about chemistry at the time, but you'd like watch these storms, like coming across the Atlantic, getting bigger. So kind of like it was like a hobby, I guess. And then I think just taking more and more of these science classes, I just knew that was kind of an academic or intellectual home. And then chemistry was kind of funny because I was way better at biology and physics. But chemistry was this challenge, this like nut that I had to crack. And I guess I'm glad I stuck with it.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I really took it to chemistry, but I really didn't like biology at all. I think I got like a C in my high school class. That was the last time I took biology. Although biochemistry I do like, though. I do like biochemistry, to be fair. Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about, so you said you grew up Miami and Fort Lauderdale, though. Did you spend equal amounts of time there, or was it mostly one city or the other?
It was kind of divided between the two. So it was like, I think most of middle school, most of elementary, middle was Miami area, and then high school is Fort Lauderdale. Yeah.
Okay. Because what I'm curious is, like, nowadays you hear about people traveling to Miami, and I don't know if it was always like this, because I don't really know much about Miami, Florida, but it's really the nightclub scene. It's really like, it's that kind of place. But but it's a historical city, so I guess what I'm curious is, like, when people go to visit Miami, are there other things that people should check out, other than doing the club scene, or like the beach, obviously.
Yeah.
Like the historical things that people can go and see down there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, of course, South Beach is is South Beach. So it's fun. I didn't really, get to participate in that too much, at least growing up there. So I was not quite old enough. But but I guess on this kind of Cuban topic, there's an enormous Little Havana is a neighborhood there that has a lot of historical places like Domino Park. A place called the Palacio de los Jugos is also fantastic, and all kinds of things. It's also a real foodie city, right? So you can really taste food from all parts of the world, and it's pretty great like that. There's also some, I guess, historical aspects from like the a long time ago, from the 1920s. So Henry Flagler built this railroad that went all the way down to the Keys, and they advertised that you could go from New York to Havana, because when you make it to Key West, there would be a ferry that would take you down to Havana. So Miami obviously was a big kind of stopping over point along the way, although of course in the Keys a lot of these bridges got washed out by hurricanes over and over again, and they finally said, forget it, this is too much work.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to see there.
I'll have to keep that in mind, because I know, like, I mean, everyone wants to go visit Miami, but like for I don't want to say the wrong reasons, but it's like they're just going down to the clubs. At least people like,
it's fun.
And it is fun. But sure, I definitely want to see more of the historical aspects of Miami. So I figured I'd give that. Definitely want to highlight that a little bit. But well, I guess
also, just if I could also add,
go ahead,
if I can also plug, there's also a lot of natural beauty here too. So I mean, the beaches are, of course, famous for a lot of reasons, but the water is actually like stunning there. It's as good as many places in the Caribbean to check out, and also, like, snorkeling is very good, and you've got the Everglades nearby too. So there's a lot of stuff to like about it.
The nature scenes, I'm sure. Is it really humid down there? It's got to be really humid down there, though. But
there's a reason I live in Boston.
To be fair, though,
part of that is that. Yeah,
I was gonna say I live in Houston now, though, so it's really, it's really not that big of a deal now. I don't think you really ever get used to the humidity, but I suppose you just kind of like, you just kind of have to accept you're gonna sweat during the summer. Like it just is what it is.
Yeah, that's right.
But so I also I did find it interesting that you did track hurricanes. I think that would be like a really like Florida thing to do. Like if you were a geeky kid, like to track hurricanes. That would be.
Yeah, that's right.
How did you get that information? Like, was it the news or like?
Yeah, so this was the very late 90s, early 2000s. So I would literally, be whatever, 12 years old, 13 years old, like waiting for the tropical update on the Weather Channel. So I was, would be like dying to like get home to make sure I was there for this tropical updates, like get the first bit of news. So it was kind of, now of course everything's just on your phone, it's a lot easier. So I still kind of track hurricanes still, but it's just really for fun now.
There's a meme going around, at least like in my I guess people like pretty much, I guess, our age, is like when you're at a party and like you're like really nervous, you like check the weather app on your phone because you don't really know, you can't you're like so nervous to talk to people. So I think that's super funny now. Super relevant. But so Florida for high school, middle school, and then you
Yeah.
moved to New York University for your undergrad. What was
Yeah.
kind of some of the decisions like leading into that? Why New York University? The whole shebang.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of, I mean, you'll see through this interview podcast that I didn't really have like a really clear plan, although it looks really linear at the end, right? If you look at like my CV or something. So, being you're
As with
like, oh yeah, this
everyone.
makes all the sense in the world, but there was a lot of kind of good luck and also really good mentorship. So I remember with NYU, it was I'd got into a bunch of schools. I apparently didn't know anything existed west of the Mississippi because I didn't apply to anywhere in California. Mostly don't know anything about it. But yeah, so I got into a bunch of schools. But I remember one teacher in particular had in high school, Mrs. Russo, who taught AP chemistry. So
Hey.
she was also Cuban-American. Yeah, or actually, I don't know if Cuban or Cuban-American, but in any case, she was like I remember she really heavily tried to push me towards NYU. She like wrote this a recommendation letter, almost I think without me even knowing, for the American Chemical Society Scholars Program, the ACS Scholars Program,
Oh wow.
and she had gone to Hunter in New York for undergrad, so.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of was like, New York is amazing, like you'd really love it, whatever. And I remember I visited um, on an undergraduate research day, I guess, that I found out about online, and uh, just was totally like taken by the city, by the school. I had met with actually a faculty member that actually responded to a high school student's email, Professor Kirschenbaum, and wanted to give him a shout out for responding and kind of taking me around. And I think I kind of made my decision mostly based on the city vibes and the department.
I was gonna say that. I mean, you said you grew up in like kind of Miami area, but there really is nothing like New York
Yeah.
City, though. Like especially like downtown Manhattan. Like it really is.
Yeah.
There's really nothing like it in the world. Honestly, I would even argue. Like it really is just one of a kind. And it's got it. Look, it is expensive now, but like if you, I think if people could afford it, though, people definitely would live there for like just the vibes of the city. That's kind of a bias because I am from the Northeast, but I do like the Northeast.
Okay.
Kind of ruffle and bustle kind of nature of it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That's really cool that your high school teacher did that for you. I mean, I don't like that is really that's really awesome, really thoughtful. So you said she went there?
Exactly. I don't know where. She went to Hunter College.
Okay.
I think
Hunter
is up on 65th Street or something. Yeah,
it's up there. Okay. Now, and when you arrive there, that professor to kind of show you around is also like really, I mean, that's really a great opportunity. So it seemed like a no-brainer to me. I mean, I'm sure if any high school student had the opportunity to do that, especially like so impressionable at that age, is like, oh man, like kind of have to go here,
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when you went to NYU, though, so you're at NYU. Did you go right into chemistry or do any undergraduate research, anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I started as a biochem major, and I think as a kind of I think the idea was like I liked AP Bio and I liked AP Chem, so I guess I'll just merge them into biochem. And then I discovered proteins and how much I don't like them. It was like one of these things where I was taking organic and I was like, wow, like I really like this class. I really loved organic chemistry. I like just the mechanisms, the structure, the 3D-ness. It was really attractive, but I was still biochem at the time. And then I took my first biochem class, and then they, I think they kind of depicted some protein. It was like, P450, I don't know what, with some like carboxylate hanging off of it. And I was like, there are like thousands of atoms here.
Yeah, right.
How can you just highlight these three atoms? And I realized at that point that, proteins were too big, messy, squishy for me to like really wrap my head around. And it was just a different kind of level of molecular complexity. So, I got through, it was fine, but immediately changed to chemistry. And I think I'll also shout out that I took organic chemistry from Maitland Jones, who got kind of infamous, I guess, in the news kind of recently. This is the professor that like the NYU pre-meds like famously like fired, basically, right? There was like a lot of complaints about him, which is really unfortunate because he was a really, really fantastic teacher, and he insisted on these, you know, problem-based classes, like essentially what was like the flipped classroom, probably before it was called the flipped classroom, and
Yeah.
it was so informative and useful for, I think, how I thought about the class and the concepts in organic. And actually, that's something I still incorporate in my classes today. But we can talk about that a little later.
Yeah, I was trying to look up the Wikipedia of Maitland Jones. I wasn't really familiar with him, but yeah, it's definitely
Oh yeah,
let's definitely return to that for sure.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
so any like undergraduate research experience then during your time there as
Oh
well?
right, yeah. Yeah, so I worked with Jim Canary on synthetic organic and supramolecular chemistry. So I actually got my hands dirty as an undergrad, and this was a really good experience for a variety of reasons. I met some of my best friends
Mm.
in this lab. Jim, I mean, I can't quite say enough about what a fantastic mentor he was and how he's still an important mentor in my life. So, just totally kind of transformative. I think, he saw this first gen student that, was working really hard and cared a lot about, chemistry, but maybe was a little, misguided on next steps. Like, for example, I didn't know that graduate school was
Like an option,
free and
sure.
you would get
Yeah.
a stipend.
Yeah.
Yeah, like an option at all. And then, yeah, exactly. An option at all, first of all. And then second, that it was like financially like doable and
Yeah.
good. So I remember I had this conversation with him where he's like, "Oh, have you thought about graduate school?" And I said, "What is that?" So he explained it. And I was like, "Oh, no, this sounds too expensive. I don't think I can do this." And he explains how it goes. So then I was telling I remember I like being in New York, I went over to my grandparents' place, and
Yeah.
I was telling them about this, and they're like, no, like they're telling me in Spanish, like, no, Steven, no, that's not how it works. School costs money. That this is a scam. This isn't real. And I was
Yeah.
like, no, this is someone I trust. Like, this is how it is. And they were very, very skeptical. Like, it was like a whole thing. So eventually, I fortunately listened to Jim and not my grandparents on
Yeah.
this,
Right.
and yeah, thought about next steps.
That's really cool. I had the same exact. I feel like a lot of undergrads might even have a lot of them might have this experience where, like, it was getting to like my fall of senior year, because I have a background in chemistry and chemical engineering. I was doing research for like one of my professors. I went to his office because we were talking about like undergraduate poster session, but he had asked like, all right, what are your next steps here? I mean, it's fall senior year. You have a lot of experience here. I said, well, I hadn't really thought about that. I was kind of waiting on that. He said, you should really consider graduate school, because obviously I'd done like 2 years of like undergraduate research. So I had something under my belt.
Yeah.
And I was like, literally the same thing as he was like, isn't that going to cost me a lot of money? You go to graduate school? He's like, well, no, it's free for at least chemistry students. Well, I shouldn't say free, but
yeah,
it's, tuition's paid for. And I was like, oh, really? And that kind of opened up that just opened up the floodgates. So really absolutely unique experience or opportunity for like, at least for, I don't know about the other STEM programs, but I know for chemistry, it's like, it's tuition. So that's great for us then.
Yeah, it is.
So having some undergraduate research experience, you discussed graduate school with your advisor, talked about it with your grandparents. What about, the next step is like starting to apply, I guess, or, in different places that, because I know you went to UCLA, but was that kind of an easy decision to go there, or, how did that all work out?
Yeah. So a big change was, I guess from undergraduate to graduate is that I totally switched to computations, right? So I think I realized at some point in undergraduate research that, I was actually a lot more interested in like the spectroscopy and kind of the physical processes behind what I was making. Like the synthesis itself was, important, but it wasn't like what I was, I guess, passionate about. So so this is maybe the first or second example now of a mentor basically helping to shape my trajectory, right? So Jim suggested, he's like, how about Ken Houk at UCLA? And I think my first answer was, who's
A
that?
goat.
Because I'd only
Absolute
done
goat.
experiments at the time. I know, exactly, right? Like the OG, right, of computational chemistry. And I think so. I remember Jim told me, like, he probably almost has like 1,000 papers or something. So a little ashamed, I like went to literature and looked up his stuff. And what I loved about his papers is that they were written like an experimentalist, but all with computed results, sometimes
Right.
with corroborating experiments. And this was really, I think, attractive to me. I didn't know anything about LA or California really. So I think starting that conversation, we just thought about applying out there and like a bunch of different California schools. I think in the end it really came down to Ken's lab and also Eric Anslin's lab at UT Austin. So basically continuing the experiments, but from kind of a bit of a different perspective from Jim, or just switching completely to computations. And I think these departmental visits were really helpful. In narrowing down the many choices down to these two. But ultimately, I think when I walked into Ken's office and met him, that was it, right? We just kind of clicked, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I laugh about it now because like similar to you, like when I started applying to graduate school, it's really funny, like looking back, like as an undergrad, like, or at least like graduating undergrad, you really have no idea who these people are. But like when you get into the field, it's like no, these guys are like superstars. And it's like, I always found that kind of funny for me personally. It was like, I had no idea who these guys are. And like most of America doesn't even care. Right. But like in our world, they're like superstars. I always found that like super funny to me.
Right.
Well,
exactly. Little celebrities.
I know you mentioned, that's all good. I know you mentioned that you would become interested in more the computational side, but how did that, was that over your time at NYU, or was it kind of like an abrupt switch, I guess? Let's say like you had done experimental stuff as an undergrad, and then you said you kind of were committed then to doing like just computational stuff with Ken Houk, or did you do like little bits and pieces of computational stuff at NYU?
So I did almost nothing that I would call computational now. Maybe I might call it kind of intensive data analysis, maybe like, I don't know, some like really, really, really light machine learning kind of things, so that's kind of like where that came from. And I think when I actually started with Ken, he had an experimental lab. So I came in with the idea that I would do both experiments and theory. But over time, just probably over the first like 6 months, just totally switched to computations. It just felt like a better fit to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a good learning curve in that time period, but the group was super supportive and helpful.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I think, and we're going to talk about this later because now you have kind of a summer research program, which basically is really gets undergraduates or whoever people from community college to like get integrated into computational chemistry. We'll definitely return to that later because that's super exciting, I think, and really cool that you do that now. But so you moved to UCLA. I mean, did you talk? I mean, obviously you talked to like your parents and grandparents about this, but like they were like, "Oh my God, you're moving to UCLA, you're moving to LA." How'd that conversation go?
I mean, I think they were kind of used to me being far away at that point. Especially my parents were used to me being far away. My grandparents were like less enthusiastic. Of course, as this is kind of funny, but as Cuban refugees, right? They are very sensitive to anything that's politically left, right? So they warned me that that the professors at UCLA were all communists and he needed to not listen to them. And you have to be careful out there and all this stuff, which turned out also not really true. But like I get it, right? They went through a lot to get out of Cuba. So but I think they were really proud that that I was going to this kind of institution, and I was too. I mean, I never thought as a high school student that this was a PhD at UCLA was like literally unimaginable for me.
Right. So, I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, And you mentioned too at the beginning. I'm almost speechless like even talking about it, because it's like you didn't plan this out. Like it just kind of like one thing led to the next. It's like not this grand plan here. It's just taking your opportunities when they come up. Work hard, and have a smile on your face, and you can go pretty far. Be kind to people, and those things will take you the furthest, I think. But so you get to LA. I mean, obviously huge. I mean, huge shift, and I would say in city culture. From New York to LA is two of the most famous cities, and I'd even argue the world. Honestly, that's like everyone just knows New York and LA. First impressions when you first got there,
or it didn't feel like a city to me. It was this enormous place. Like I felt like this is kind of a funny observation, but I felt like it took forever to land. Like when you approach some city, it's it's kind of like nothing for a while, and then all of a sudden there's buildings and stuff, and then you land, right? But it was like we saw buildings from like 30 minutes out. I mean, it was like this enormous sprawl. So that kind of matched what I saw on the grounds. But I was absolutely like enamored with the weather. I was enamored with like the just how like chill people were. I really liked that, and it was a really like welcome change from 4 years in New York, and we know how that can be of course, Northeast people. So I had to pay the price with bagels and pizza, but I got Mexican food and all Asian food in exchange. So that was pretty nice. And also February is a very nice difference. So yeah.
No, I mean the California weather is beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, though.
And
sorry,
I really liked the other thing I really liked about California was this whole concept of the desert, right? I had not really dealt with dry places at all growing up and in undergrad. So it was so cool to be able to drive out to, like Joshua Tree or, like there's like some desert also, like Anza Borrego outside of like San Diego, like just mountains everywhere. Like it was just such a, a different place. And, So I was into it.
It is. I have yet to go out to the Pacific Coast. Definitely got to get out there. But yeah, I think. I mean, the fact that you kind of, as a graduate student too, where it's like you have things kind of paid for. You have enough to survive, right? I mean, we're not living lavishly, but we have enough to survive. Right. Absolutely. So you're kind of just out there doing your chemistry and just living in in SoCal. So I think that's a great opportunity. But you arrived to UCLA. At this point, I guess you were kind of committed to Ken Houk in some respects, right? I mean, but so what were you working on in his group?
Yeah, so when I first started, not too surprisingly, I was doing some modeling of cycloaddition reactions, right? Another, I kind of expanded into other pericyclics after that. But my first few papers, were in cycloaddition chemistry, and so, and then learning how to use these different quantum mechanical calculations, the distortion interaction model, which kind of inherited from one of my science heroes, Dan S., who's at Brigham Young University in Utah, and it was just like a totally different kind of research. I could do it from anywhere too, and I frequently would. So I frequently would go to the beach, set up a little hotspot on my phone, and just work there, and it was really cool just to be able to do that. Yeah.
That is a flex if I've ever heard it, being able to just do like, I mean, that is really cool. I mean, that is really one of the benefits of computational chemistry, that especially like after COVID, you think about everyone working from home.
Yeah.
I even know someone personally, like in our lab, who like was an experimental chemist. They had to switch online and fell in love with computational chemistry. Maybe you could speak on this a little bit too. About, let's say, industry jobs taking in like computational chemistry. I don't know what the market is like, but if there are a lot of students out there who like computers, working with computers, and have a fondness for STEM, I mean, computational chemistry seems at least something worth trying for sure, absolutely, at the minimum. But I don't know if you could speak on maybe the job market for computational chemists. I don't know if it's grown. I don't know what it's like though. Maybe touch on that a little bit.
No, I mean I think that the market is big and getting bigger. This is a huge skill, especially if you can get involved not only with computational chemistry but the AI side of things.
Okay.
So as a graduate student taking some like data science slash machine learning type courses can go a really long way. You can really get ahead of the curve, I think, from most people by having some expertise there. Of course, you could do your PhD in that kind of space too, but it doesn't take a lot to distinguish yourself. And so I have a student now that's getting ready to defend here in the next like month or so, and he's looking at postdocs, but there's also a lot of opportunities with startup companies and big companies like Pfizer and Merck just here in the Boston area. So Boston is now kind of this emerging biotech hub, or like even established, depends who you ask. But so there's lots of these kinds of jobs.
That's
Scattered
exciting.
around.
That's exciting. Yeah, because who would have thought like 30 years ago that this would have like been a thing, and it's really taken off. I would say like, well, I've only been a graduate student for like not even 3 years, but it just seems like it just seems like a huge field, and it just keeps growing. It just seems like it's the new. Everyone's got to be doing it. So
and lots of synthetic chemists are publishing in this space and getting involved with this. So I think science also, not to open up a whole can of worms, but really has gotten so much more interdisciplinary, right? These old silos of you work on this and I work on that and we never mix, like that increasingly is a thing of the past. And I think that's such a good thing for science, right?
Yeah.
For trainees, for PIs, like it just gives this real push towards everybody constantly learning. It's huge.
I've even noticed like here at Houston, like a lot of like groups are just taking in like, they'll take in like one or two computational chemists like into their groups, like because they'll be the designated person to like, if let's say you're a synthetic organic chemistry lab, you're going to want a computational chemist in your group who can really study a lot of these like computationally. And we're an organic metallic group. We're gonna have like a few students who are able to do these things. So it's just super versatile, I think, if you're able to have that in your wheelhouse for sure. But anyways, you're at UCLA doing some pericyclic reactions. Any like big any like kind of like big takeaways as a graduate student for like as far as like your research specific, like any big takeaways?
I'll also describe one other component of the PhD because there's a bit of a shift at some point, and maybe some other activities from grad school too.
Absolutely.
And then I'll kind of summarize, I guess. So So I also got involved. So I did enough pericyclic reactions that I was good. Like I probably I don't know, like 5 or 6 papers in this, and was like, okay, let's do something else. So I then got involved with this materials subgroup, which was focused on like organic photovoltaics, which I guess around that time period was pretty hot. So I teamed up with one of the postdocs there, this guy Ilan Yavuz, who's now he's a professor in Turkey, and he basically took me under his wing and showed me how he and another postdoc in the lab were basically developing a computational methodology for predicting charge transport through organic solids.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, the idea with an organic photovoltaic, right, is you have a donor material and acceptor material.
Yep.
The donor usually accepts the light, and then created sexaton, it gets split, and then the charges have to move. So what we were focusing on is on that charge moving, because if it could move fast, then it could get to the electrode and make electricity. So it was a totally new skill set, involved like, not just quantum mechanical calculations, because it's a whole solid, so you can't quite do, quantum on a whole solid.
Yep.
So it's totally different kind of modeling. We modeled, solid, really ordered crystalline materials as well as disordered systems. And in the end, it kind of gave me this kind of macro view, right? So most of it was on this micro view of these, 2 reactants coming together or a unimolecular reaction. But then I switched to this, solid state materials perspective, and that kind of laid the groundwork for what would then be my postdoc. But this interest in using light, right, to do things, right, to do useful work, to do chemical reactions, it all started from that last 2 years of my PhD, kind of maybe at the position where you're at now.
Yeah.
Just kind of starting up, and you're getting comfortable, you're getting used to your, the main parts of your project, and maybe you're interested in other stuff. So another part of this that all was happening in the background that's super important to me is I was I guess I was on the e-board, and for a while was the president of the Organization for Cultural Diversity in Chemistry, which was a graduate student-based organization. It was funded by Procter and Gamble and also UCLA support too. So this was really important to me because it was there weren't many people that had similar backgrounds as me at anywhere, not just UCLA, but like anywhere in PhD programs. So we focused really on bringing speakers from underrepresented groups, like all kinds of different people, to give talks, talk about their careers, talk about their science as well. And that's also where my interest in working with community college students started as well. So we had this outreach program that would bring in community college students. I mean, there's so many in LA. Like there's like something like 20 within a 10-mile radius of downtown. It's insane. So we started building up this program, starting with LA Trade Tech, where we would bring students from different community colleges, like literally on a school bus. We would rent a school bus and bring them to UCLA and like tell them about, higher education, tell them about research, tell them about what the transfer process was like. You could go do a PhD. Of course, that's quite a few years away, but having this in their minds, we found to be really, useful. We had joint sessions in English and in Spanish. We had parents come. I mean, it was like this whole thing that really grew while I was there.
Do they still do that now?
And so it's still there. The organization's still growing strong, and we can talk about this maybe too. But this leadership experience that I had actually blossomed into a whole nonprofit that I founded right at the end of grad school related to this. So
let's talk about it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So this was so I remember this really clearly. It was probably the last 3 months or so that I had at UCLA, and the faculty advisor for this club, right, Miguel Garcia Garibay, comes to me one day after one of our meetings, with the whole group, and he says, you should make this like a national organization, like this, like you've done such a good job like building this up here. Imagine if this grew, nationally. And I distinctly remember like laughing in his face, like just uncontrollably laughing in his face. Like there's no way, right? Like I'm writing my thesis, like I'm trying to coordinate this move, like back to the East Coast, like there's no way, right? Little did I know that's the most free time that I would ever have after that, but fine. So I remember I went out with some friends from OCDS or OCDC at the time, and I told after this meeting with Miguel, and I told them this, and I was like, "What do you think?" Like they're like, "Oh, that's a great idea. You should totally do that. Like we'll support you. Let's do this." And it then suddenly became possible, right? Like me alone, no way, impossible.
Right.
But having these other people to like kind of back me up to help me like build this suddenly made this possible. And I found that it was a really good, like dealing with incorporating this as a nonprofit, like as a thing, was a really good like productive procrastination in writing my thesis. It was like, you can't just write 8 hours a day, so I'll just distract myself a little bit while I'm working on this in the off times. And
that is great balance. What's the organization called again? What's the organization called?
So it's called the Alliance for Diversity in Science and Engineering.
Okay.
So we made that name really, we picked that name on purpose because we didn't want there to be any kind of like affinity group associated, right? Like we wanted, of course, underrepresented people to get elevated in this process, but also including overrepresented people. And it depends who you ask who's underrepresented and overrepresented. I mean, like different organizations, NSF, whatever. But in general, we need everybody on board saying that this is that is advocating that this is a good thing for science. This is a good thing for STEM. We don't want it just to be chemistry. We want it to be, as just inclusive as possible. And basically what it does now is, we have it's about 15 graduate student run chapters. Graduate students are who run the organization, so it's specifically for grad students. Postdocs and undergrads can participate, but grad students are the kind of main drivers here.
They have to be. right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're at a really unique place in their development, right? There's lots of opportunities for them to get mentoring, right? From postdocs, from faculty, from industries and government scientists, but
Yep.
also they have a lot to do. They have a lot to share with undergraduates and community college students and K through 12 students too, right? They're role models, whether they,
They
whether
know it or
you don't
not.
realize or not. Yeah. So let's focus on this group of students. Let's get them empowered. Let's get them networked. Let's get them leadership jobs, and so they can progress and stay in the science.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing. I'm about to look this up. Maybe we can talk offhand about. Because I don't even know
Sure.
if there's any chapters in Texas. But definitely if
there
there's
aren't
not,
actually.
There aren't.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Maybe we'll
not
talk
in
offhand.
Texas. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll talk offhand.
Oh no, wait, sorry, I forgot. I totally forgot.
Texas
yeah,
A&M?
There's one at Texas A&M, and we actually just had our annual meeting there. Sorry, I totally forgot this. This was back in May. I guess I was thinking Houston, but yeah. Anyway, whatever. Yeah. So just edit this out, please.
Yeah. No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so there's one
so
at A&M. There's not one in Houston, but Houston would be great though, because I mean, Houston is fourth largest city, and certainly a lot of like immigrants here, or at least for
extremely diverse. Yeah,
extremely diverse city. So, yeah, well, I would definitely talk offhand. I think this would be interesting. I think a lot of graduate students would be interested in this, something like this at Houston.
Totally.
But really cool stuff. Be sure to check it out. If you I don't know if there's any listeners that are in community college. I mean, this is a direct link to you. So be sure to check that out. So I guess so. Kind of coming back to graduate school, you mentioned you're finishing up your dissertation, about to do a postdoc. Something I always like to ask professors is, again, this is not a grand plan, but at what point was it like, okay, I really want to go be a professor now? I mean, because sometimes people who do postdocs, typically, I'm really considering about being a professor, or so was this kind of something you'd really thought about, or had that transpire?
So I think with a lot of people throughout graduate school, my professional goals changed. I thought about dropping out a bunch of times. Grad school, Ken always came to the rescue. It reminded me that I'm doing a good job, and this is this is going well, actually. And so I remember distinctly the moment where it changed, where I stopped doubting things as much, and that was actually right after my qualifying exam, of all things. So for the qual at UCLA, you had to come up with kind of a proposal, 3 specific aims, probably 5 or 6 pages, something like this, right? And there was a point where I was there was a point where it changed from me dreading it to actually really liking writing this proposal, because I was doing what researchers do: look through the literature, find the things that aren't done yet, and then propose them.
Yeah, real scientist.
So I did this. I gave my seminar, defended my ideas, basically, and there wasn't a requirement that you do those things. So it wasn't a proposal for what you would do in your PhD. It was just kind of an adjacent project or something.
Yep.
So needless to say, I passed. It was good. But then I was left in this weird period of time afterwards of what do I do? Because I was spending all my time on working on this proposal. So I just started to work on aim 1 of this proposal that I wrote, and I didn't tell Ken that I was working on this, and I just gave him the manuscript one day, and he was like, what is this? Where did this come from? And I was like, oh, specific aim 1 from my proposal. And I remember he laughed and was like, this is awesome. This is your best paper. I love this. Let's, minor edits. Let's get this submitted. And it got in. So this was in JOC, and it was an electrocyclic ring opening reaction, and totally theoretical, just this cool idea. And so I think at that point, after that paper got in, it became very clear to me, right? It was I came up with this idea. I was doubting myself. I came up with this idea. I defended this idea. I wrote this paper, and it got accepted without Ken. I might be able to do this on my own one day and help somebody else do this. And then from there, it was, steps being taken towards, the next steps, which was the postdoc. Yeah.
I think it's really important to actually talk about that, though, because I feel like a lot of early graduate students it's a struggle. It is a sludge those first few years. And
it is.
It does seem like at some point it does start to click. Like it really does. I feel like I'm even kind of experiencing that right now. It's like for the first 2 years, it was kind of a sludge. I had my qualifying exam in like 2 weeks. So,
okay.
But I was like, damn, I was like, every time you get to the qualifying exam, you always feel like you wish you had more. It's like, I wish I had more.
Yeah.
But then you kind of take a step back, you actually start writing it. And it's like, okay, actually, wait, there's stuff here. It's coming. But I felt good writing it and talking about it. So it's kind of, I'm really feel like I'm at the point where it's going to start to switch now. And it's not that, let me make it clear. I'm not saying I like what I do, but it's also nice to just have things that work too. It's like, so we're like right on that point.
Of course.
So I think it's extremely important.
Well, good luck.
I appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, I think it's extremely important to talk about because I feel like it's really not all hunky dory. Like it is tough work sometimes. You mentioned it. I mean, you kind of doubted yourself at times, even thinking about dropping out. I mean, what were what were some of the things that what were some of his advice or like was his words? What kind of kept you going?
I think it was I mean, he was just really supportive, right? Like it was kind of this, what are you talking about attitude? Like you're doing great. And he would like remind me of the things like I've done and like remind me of, the conferences that I've gone to, like, give talks at, like, kind of early on, things like this where he's like, and you do this, you're like running this like diversity organization too. Like you're an important part of, the community here at UCLA. And those were those kinds of things. I think also just being part of that organization too helped, right? Because, there was like a community there that kind of helped to, retain, right, underrepresented people in a way. I mean, it's like literally the purpose in a way of that organization, and it worked. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's important.
You definitely don't do a PhD alone. Alone.
I feel like, and also people got to remember too, like your PhD is time for you to learn. Like God, you're not an expert. You're not even an expert by the time you're done, honestly. I mean, you might be an expert in your field, but like, you're definitely not like, some of the best professors are still learning. So it's like, it's just a learning process. You're not you're not an expert. You should be an expert within your field, I guess, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's good to hear. So postdocs, you're like looking into, you think you went to Harvard, right?
Yeah.
For your postdoc. So
yeah.
What was,
that's right.
What was that like? Or, what kind of led you back to Harvard?
Yeah. So, I applied to the Department of Energy, Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, program.
All right.
So I know it's a mouthful, and it has energy back to back. So, but anyway, so this DOE fellowship I got, which, like I said, was really motivated by the work that started with, with those organic photovoltaics. So if I hadn't started to do that, I probably wouldn't have had a proposed project that would qualify for something like that. So the idea there now was, again, from the work that I'd done on the solid state, was to kind of go back to the molecular level and say, how can I use high throughput virtual screening, high throughput computations, and machine learning to essentially predict what the properties of these molecules are in, a millionth, a billionth of the time that it would normally take to do the quantum mechanical calculation. So that was a totally new skill set. So staying learning always is kind of a constant theme here, as you'll see in my current research program too. But yeah, that was kind of the idea. This was really cutting edge at the time. Now many more people do machine learning, which is fantastic to see chemistry, which is a pretty conservative subject, to adopt this new idea. So I love this for the community. And also there was a component on actually looking at the kind of incorporating some of the solid state again of modeling both this like donor layer and this acceptor layer, and like how those intermolecular interactions at those interfaces helped control the efficiency of cells. So it was a pretty short postdoc in the end. It was just under 2 years.
Perfect.
But
perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Just under 2 years. So I ended up focusing mostly on the machine learning, which is fine because some of the other stuff ended up in my faculty proposal too. So I went to work with Alan Asper-Gusick,
Okay.
who, another just absolutely legendary name and mentor, right? Like the key thing that's been common to all my mentors is that they've been just really good people, right? That have helped like just guide me, the person, instead of me being kind of like, a chess pawn in their game, which
That's a good
I really
analogy.
have appreciated. Yeah. And so I mean, Harvard has all kinds of reputations, right? But I think Alan was a really nice, kind of a good mentor, and the group was really cool too, just in terms of being able to learn from each other and the kind of the informality of things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So yeah, what I guess what in particular brought you to Harvard though? I mean, because postdocs can kind of go anywhere in the world. So what drew you there
Yeah.
for sure?
So I mean, in the U.S. at the time, there was one name basically that was doing ML and chemistry, and
Okay.
that was Lon. So I
Wow.
think I saw the writing on the wall that this was the future, in some respects of chemistry, and that it would be, an important tool because I increasingly was noticing, for example, in the literature, right, synthetic papers would have, some DFT calculations of some orbital or something, and it was seemingly like lots of people could do DFT now, which is also amazing, right? But how could I be different for my faculty job? So I wanted to incorporate something kind of new, and Alon was like the person. So
Yeah.
since I got the DOE money, right, it was kind of easy to say, hey Alon, I can join your team as an organic chemist here that knows how to do these calculations, and you can show me how to do ML, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's
Like
awesome.
80% of our interview was in Spanish, and and we just did it.
That's really cool. But
Yeah.
I definitely want to hop into your research now because
Yeah.
there's certainly a lot to talk about here.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely.
so you took a faculty position at Northeastern, right in downtown
Yep.
Boston. I didn't know it was in
Yep.
downtown. I didn't actually know it was like literally right down the street from Fenway. So I don't know if you catch any games.
Yeah.
Surely you do, and they kind of stink right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, there's a lot of pedigree there though. But anyway,
Anyway, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Boston is a heavy sports town for sure. But yeah, so so Northeastern was, yeah, I mean, well, very close, of course, to Harvard, and it is right in downtown Boston. I so I started here in 2017, and how to explain? So my research, I think I had my real ideas really focused more on organic photovoltaics as opposed to photochemistry. But the initial crop of students, undergraduates and graduate students that I had, were all almost uniformly into this idea of sustainable chemistry and
mm,
green chemistry and like making an impact in the world. And I tremendously appreciated this. So I shared my faculty proposal with them and said, hey, like, what parts of this sound interesting? Like, what do you want to do here, right? And many of them were in this photochem space. They're like, oh, this sounds really cool. Like to be able to do the same reactions they would otherwise take, days of heating, or using like, an iridium catalyst. We find iridium like on meteors. There's not a lot of it on this planet. It's super expensive. If we could just use sunlight or a cheap LED or something, wouldn't that be great? And then if you mix that in then with some kind of like pretty nerdy mechanistic organic chemistry, you've got the program that I'm at, that we've
mm.
created. So so what this has ended up becoming, right, over the last 6 years, because I'm just over my sixth year here at Northeastern, thanks, yeah, has been, this group that, creates, I would say, cyber infrastructure. So we've created, for example, the Verde Materials Database. This is the
Yep.
first database of its kind to have both ground and excited state structures, redox potentials, orbitals, dipole moments, and the like. Right? If you're making an organic photoredox catalyst, like, you should check out Verde, because it has all the properties all computed the same way that you would be interested in. We have also used like what are called single reference methods like DFT,
Yep.
and multi-configurational methods like CASA-CF,
Yep.
to really interrogate these the mechanisms of these reactions. And we care about this because, we hear about photochemistry because these are such valuable mechanistic questions. These reactions are happening, right, on sub-nanosecond time scales usually. So there's no way experimentally of resolving those structures on these excited state surfaces, with experimental techniques. You can do, of course, transient spectroscopy and fluorescence and all kinds of other spectroscopic measurements. But those structures is, I think, what we need as chemists to really understand the reactions. I tell my students our superpower as chemists, right, is that we can look, especially organic chemists, is that we can just look at a molecule and say, that's strained, that's nucleophilic, that reaction will never work. And we can do that for thermal reactions because we have 300 years of chemical intuition that's been built up. Right. But in photochem, this doesn't exist because we don't know what these structures look like in the excited states. So by using these high-level computations and resolving them on a dynamic timescale, right, we can actually start to build these structure property relationships because we now have the structures, right? So that's, maybe I'll just pause there a second.
Yeah, there's so much to dive into. It's all. I guess maybe let's start with the Verde Materials database. I think.
Yeah, sure.
Because this is, like you mentioned, this is really first of its kind, and how did you make this database, right? So obviously you had to have done some machine learning, but if you go to this database, you can look at you can look at, let's say, characteristics for photovoltaics, bioimaging agents, catalysts, and you can really look at the characteristics of these structures. So first, where was the inception of this idea, and then how did you this must have taken, how long did this take to make? And what was the work process for that?
So first need to credit an amazing undergraduate that was in my lab, Baruch Abreha, who really championed this work. So his interests were really at the intersection of data science and chemistry. So he wanted to be a researcher in my lab, and I basically immediately took him and found money for him because he had exactly the right skill set and interest to do this. And this was one of the things that was in my proposal, my faculty proposal, that was, to create this database, because there's many databases out there that have lots of, quantum mechanical calculations, but you can have, you can have some limitations, like they're computed, the same molecules maybe are computed with different levels of theory. So you're comparing kind of apples to oranges, or it doesn't have, for example, these excited state geometries, like the actual structures in the excited states. So that's, and then because you don't have those structures, then it's hard to tell the excited state properties, right? So, so this kind of, the idea here was to build one database that would be able to, account for those, whatever shortcomings of the other databases. So probably took a year or so, and again, totally undergraduate student led, and the database continues, right? So we're of course continuing to upgrades. We just upgraded the website. That's the new one now. VerdeMaterialsDB.com, and we're constantly adding materials. So we're part of a few different institutes and NSF centers that are interested in our high throughput virtual screening capabilities. So all of those different screening projects just get uploaded, because at the end, they're all organic chromophores. They all have different purposes, or could have different purposes, and you can find a pretty significant molecular diversity of structures there.
Let me ask you, so I guess maybe a question is how do you use this database then? Let's say what are maybe two applications that one would use this for, and how do you use it?
Right. So if you were looking, let's say, for a material for an organic photovoltaic, right? Let's say that you're going to look for something that has a certain HOMO, so it doesn't react with oxygen. You're looking for a certain absorption profile, so you're going to look up vertical excitation energies. You might screen against redox, competing redox processes. So you can search based on the different parameters there, and then you can get this list of molecules that fit those those screening criteria. And like I was saying before, that it has all kinds of different chromophores. This is really key, because suppose you were not interested, like suppose like one molecule, you want it to be, absorb like green light or something, but instead the hit you get absorbs ultraviolet light. Now this molecule is not necessarily a failed search, but this could be, for example, like a sunscreen, right? You're looking for molecules that can absorb UV light. Now those are sunscreens, right? What they're going to do to your body, I'm not sure. This is just for photophysical properties, but nonetheless, it gives that wide range, so you can kind of dial your application. And there's lots of these applications.
That's really cool. Yeah, if you're in the need for some sort of organic materials, I'll definitely I'll put this in the link in the description. People can check this out. Awesome. Even if you're just curious, like just go check out the database. Perhaps
and people can download the whole thing, and they can do their own machine learning on it. I mean, that's kind of why we made it too. It's like a hub for the community to use, right?
That's awesome. How do you get? I guess one other question I have then is, how do you implement more materials? Like, how does that? Do you have like an AI that just kind of sources the literature and like pulls in the information, or how does it work?
Usually comes from collaborations with experimentalists. So right now we're just had a meeting yesterday with Grace Han at Brandeis, who was telling me about some solar energy storing materials. So molecules that undergo reactions, right, in the presence of light, and then store a bunch of energy, and then you can selectively release it, right? So she has some new candidates. I won't tell you which ones, but she has some new candidates, and she wanted, basically a high throughput screening set of these. So she can, I think, if we do the full combinatorial library, it'll probably be about 2,000 molecules, and we can just put it in the queue, and the computational resources are really good here. So we can create this screening set that might be of interest to her, and then of course to others once we release it publicly. So there's lots of these different collaborations. Photopharmacology is another one. We've worked with Dirk Trauner at Penn to come up with new azobenzenes and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it kind of comes from the community, which I really like. Yeah,
I was gonna say, what's really cool is like, this is not really gatekeeping information. Anyone could just go and see this stuff. And, we absolutely love to see it. That's really cool. Yep. It's already grown, but I'm excited to see like how big this database gets. I mean, I'm sure, like, I can't even imagine how big it'll be in like 1 year from now, 5 years from now, like, right? I mean, that's really cool. But other aspects of your research lab, so it is a bit of a mouthful, but non-adiabatic photodynamics of organic pericyclic reactions. Let's talk about it. I understand pericyclic reactions, but non-adiabatic photodynamics is something that's well out of my wheelhouse. So I'll let you kind of talk about that.
For sure. So I love this research area. I love this research area, full stop. This brings together all of the different trainings that I've had in one project. Because we've combined this in such a unique way, it's also created a new field altogether. So, and I'll get to it. So basically the way I see this is, these are molecular dynamic simulations that are happening on the excited state. That could be a singlet state, triplet state, whatever. And then it progresses in time until the excited state like crosses with the ground state. And at regions where those two energies are the same, where there's that degeneracy region, that's known as a conical intersection, which is kind of like a transition state in the sense that you have to go through a conical intersection to make a photoproduct, but you don't necessarily make a photoproduct. It gets kind of complicated. But in any case, the non-adiabatic part of this is just when there's regions of strong coupling between those two surfaces. So that's the non-adiabaticity. So anyway, we run this dynamics from the excited state onto the ground state, and you can find the distribution of products. You need really kind of those multi-configurational dynamics. You integrate kind of very often every half femtosecond, which is femtosecond is 10 to the minus 15 seconds.
Oh man,
I know, they're just like not human time scales. It's not really for us to completely understand, but we can understand though the outcome of the reactions, and we can with looking at these structures and the pathways they take to get to the products or back to the reactants. We're starting to make those, like I said, those structure property relationships. Now, this brings in the parts of research that I've had in the past. One, a deep love and understanding of organic chemistry. Really the highest level is quantum mechanical calculations from my grad school experience.
Yep.
And then now I'll tell you about how machine learning got roped into this.
Yeah.
Because from my postdoc, right? So machine learning is required in a lot of cases because our limit for the simulation time is about a picosecond. So that's 10 to the minus 12 seconds. And that can take weeks. I mean, that could take like 6 to 8 weeks for a human to wait to get this answer. And the worst part about that is that it's not guaranteed that at the end of those 8 weeks, there's even an answer to be had, because many of the trajectories could be stuck in the excited state, which means you don't know what product they form, right? So what our big innovation here was to develop this code called Pyramid, which I can send you the full name. We came up with the acronym first and then filled it in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Pyramid uses ML to predict or guess, depending how cynical you are, the energies and forces along the trajectories instead of running the full quantum mechanical calculations. So that means we're doing the calculations in the predictions of the energies and forces in about 1/100,000th of the time, which means we can extend the timescales by 100,000 times.
Okay.
So it's a huge change in what was possible in photochemistry, and essentially has created this new field of machine learning photodynamics. And this all happens kind of in late 2020, early 2021. And there was another group in Vienna, Leticia Gonzalez's group and Philippe Marquetin. They had kind of a parallel process to what we were doing right around the same time. So we actually all got together for the first time in this summer in July in Vienna, and basically had our first, kind of in-person meeting of this new field, which was just like the coolest thing that can happen. I think one of the coolest things that can happen to you as an academic, like you get to go to Vienna, and like second, you meet with these these people who've been reviewing your papers, and you've been reviewing theirs, and you're talking about the future of this new field.
That's really awesome. Yeah. So I think how does the AI work then, or the machine learning work then for this? Like, how does that? I mean, I can't even imagine how you would even start this.
Yeah, so this was the I worked with a really amazing postdoc in my lab who's now a professor in China in Shenzhen. This is Jingbai Li, and basically we came up with this idea together because we kept running into these simulations that wouldn't finish in that picosecond timescale with actual results, so we couldn't publish them, right? So we started to just I guess use some of the knowledge that I, had gained during my postdoc and his independent research in this space. And we came up with just a neural network based model that could predict these energies and forces really well. And on multiple states, right? The ground state and the multiple excited states that could be involved with these transformations.
Now, you had to program that you guys yourself, though, right? You would have to have done that. Okay. Now,
so that software is open access.
Okay. Yeah. So how did you develop that software then? Like, how did that? Like, I don't know if it's too complicated, but how do you like? I'm just curious to like how.
Yeah. I mean, I learned how to code a bit during my postdoc. That's where I kind of got the most experience. But Jingbai is a much better coder than I am, and we basically just. We had this idea of like what the software should be able to do, and iterated and guess and checked. I mean, there were many days where he and I kind of sat side by side and worked on error messages together.
That's awesome.
And tried to troubleshoot this thing. Yeah, exactly.
Where can people find this open source software?
So it's on GitHub. I can send you a link.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put in the description for this if people are interested in this kind of this area. Really, but it was also really. I'll just add one quick little thing. So it was really cool this summer at the Gordon Physical Organic meeting, which I guess Judy Wu from your department was there. Yeah,
so Dean Cantillo at UC Davis, who's been doing dynamics for a long time, actually is I think the first adopter of our code for his own photochemical reactions.
That's
so he
awesome.
talked about that. It was really cool to see that.
Another goat in the field, honestly. Yeah, I was gonna say another goat in the field. Like, like
Yeah.
just use your software. That must have been a really cool moment for you guys.
It was, indescribable. Yeah.
All right. That's awesome. I'll be sure to leave a link, and people that are interested in this can definitely go take a look and see and use it for themselves. Honestly, that's kind of the goal here. Honestly,
Yeah.
People using the software. But another part,
Totally.
Another part of your research is in covalent organic frameworks. We had discussed about organic photo. Well, actually, these aren't really the same thing, I guess. Covalent organic frameworks. Well, actually, are they? Photovoltaics and organic frameworks are not really the same thing, but I'll kind of let you take the reins on that area of research in your group as well.
Yeah. So this is also a really this was also a really exciting project, and this also involved another amazing postdoc. This is Jordan Cox, who's was in my lab for a few years, and it was cool because his background was totally different from mine. So he was working with Jason Benedict at SUNY Buffalo, and that was a crystallography lab, right? A solid state chemistry lab on MOFs and things. So Jordan was amazing at seeing 3D, right? At really seeing a crystalline structure, and I was at a molecular level was my kind of strength. So, I had this idea for a new kind of photovoltaic that could, I guess, overcome how do I explain? So in organic photovoltaics, there is this like dogma that you can either have lots of long range order, but low interfacial surface area between those two donor and acceptor materials, or you can have lots of surface area, but then low order, basically. And you need the order to do efficient charge transport, right? Like from my grad school, but you also need surface area to actually separate these charges into excitons, separate the excitons into charges. So it turns out that the one with lots of surface area will win out. So if you have like a bulk heterojunction, is basically everything's all mixed together, maximize the surface area. That'll give higher power conversion efficiencies. But my thought was, why don't we create a new photovoltaic that can maximize both interfacial surface area and long range order? So that's where this idea of a covalent organic framework as a photovoltaic device came from.
Okay.
So if we could design, a framework that would be crystalline, right, that could encapsulate fullerenes, a typical, electron acceptor material, then we could have like an ordered design, right, where we just have this porous material that's just occupied with fullerenes. So we designed this thing totally theoretically, put this paper out as a theoretical paper, and I think J Materials Chem. And we had actually somebody reach out to us, an experimentalist. This was Tim Bender at the University of Toronto. Reached out to us and said, like, what a cool paper, what an interesting design, because he had also been working on these subthalocyanines, which are just like curved molecules like this, and they like capture little buckyballs. He had been working on that for a long time, but not in this kind of organic framework sense. So we started talking, and then, well, the pandemic happened. So, the collaboration kind of like obviously tapered off for a bit. It's restarting now. So I'm hoping that one day, we can see this theory dream kind of come to life.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. Before we wrap up here, I definitely want to touch on some of the outreach programs you guys do as well. So we mentioned earlier that you guys do, you have research opportunities for community college students in the Boston area. I definitely want to touch on that a little bit, because I think I don't know. This is kind of for the Boston area, but hopefully maybe other programs can kind of implement this program at their research institutions. So do you mind talking about it a little bit, and like how it started up, and what opportunities that kids can that students can get out of this?
Yeah, for sure. So this was part of my NSF career grants. So I came up with this idea during middle of the pandemic while everybody was working at home, right? Or or not, if you were an experimentalist, if you were trying to learn something to do, right, with computers. So originally, the idea was that these would be, pandemic proof summer research experiences. And, I specifically made this for community college students because we know, first of all, these are majority minority institutions nationwide, and in many cases locally as well. And for me, this was a way that we could further broaden the pipeline of people, backgrounds similar to mine, people from underrepresented groups, marginalized groups, to access science. And we know at community colleges, there's usually not a lot of research opportunities unless there's some like established program with some nearby schools. So
Right.
I did a lot of research, like connecting with folks here in the Boston area. There's lots of community colleges here, and I couldn't find any programs that were similar. I also found out that there were no, computational chemistry classes that were taught at community colleges in all of Massachusetts. So I thought, all right, there's an obvious need here. Let's do this. And this is probably the case across the US too. So so the first year we took 3 students. All from Massachusetts, specifically from Massachusetts, to participate in this. It's totally remote. They got a stipend for participating part-time. So it was 20 hours a week was the expectations. We know that there are lots of what are, I guess, known as non-traditional students that are at community colleges, people with families, jobs, whatever, that can't dedicate, the 40 hours a week that you might as an REU, or leave their families, right, for that much time. So we made it part-time, but of course, if people wanted to work more, they could. We gave a stipend, and it was a 6-week program that first year. So it was really a remarkable success because all these students were doing original research projects from home as community college students who had never taken a computational chemistry class. And this was, only possible, seriously, because of my research group. My research group is super collaborative. They all help each other out. And there's just this culture of, peer mentorship overall, that essentially makes that possible. If it was just me, it would be really hard, right? But having my students gain that experience is also very valuable. And that was in year 1. Year 2, it expanded even more. So year 2, we took 6 students. We had some funding from an NSF institute that helped to kind of augment that, as well as from the Camille Dreyfus Foundation that also helped cover one of the stipends. But now this last year that just concluded in August, we expanded it nationwide. So we actually had students from Connecticut, from California, I think another place too. And, we are now doing this virtual research experience across 3 time zones. And it was just awesome, like how it's growing.
That is just incredible. Really a unique opportunity for students to get involved here. I guess what I'm curious about is like how did these students find out about this opportunity? I mean, what's the kind of the outreach been like? Especially like from California. Yeah, how did they hear about this? Right, so.
Yeah, so from California, I had a lot of connections from my days at UCLA. So I knew still, 10 maybe more community college professors in the area. So it's easy to kind of spread the word that way. I've also been an associate on the ACS Committee on Minority Affairs too, which has also a significant number of community college professors on there. So spread the word through there. So I've always had kind of a big community college network. So it's kind of easy to spread the word. But now hopefully they, I'm told that the students that participated this year are going to make a LinkedIn group. So all the students that have participated in the past can be connected to each other. But this, that's for them to do. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, Professor Lopez, I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast today. It's been extremely awesome talking to you. And to be honest, you're really walking the walk here. I mean, you really are putting your boots on the ground. You and your group really kind of setting the groundwork for how, research institutes can do like real actual outreach for community colleges, but also with the, oh my God, I'm blanking. That's it. Alliance for Diversity in Science and Engineering. I mean, you guys really are doing it.
That's it. Yeah.
I'm definitely going to leave, links to these websites in the description. People can certainly go follow everything on Twitter. And I mean, all this stuff is open source. I mean, it's for people to use. So
Yeah.
hopefully, people that listen in, if they have questions, they'll definitely reach out to you as well. I think, like I mentioned, I mean,
Awesome.
you really are walking the walk here. Like you're doing it. So it's super.
Oh, thanks so much, Aiden. This has been awesome to participate. Yeah.
I look forward to seeing these this grow. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for students to do. But
yeah.
Okay. But so anyway, thank you everyone for listening today, and then we'll see you in the next episode.